So how is money usually introduced in classes? Before you see what I show next, I'm sure you've all seen this, and this is the way that you probably were initially taught, at least in the textbook, hopefully not by your professors. We had Robinson Crusoe. He discovers Friday. He colonizes Friday, actually. And they start bartering fish for corn. So Crusoe brings corn, he becomes the farmer, and Friday catches fish, and they barter. Barter is inconvenient. You need what economists call a double coincidence of wants, okay? You have to find somebody who wants what you have produced because they don't have it. And you have to want what they produce because you don't have it. So barter is a very inefficient way to run a market economy. So what they do is they look around for something they can use as a medium of exchange. Maybe they start with seashells or something like that, but eventually they settle on, of course, gold. Okay, why? Because gold has special properties. One is it's bright and shiny. Everybody wants gold, right? Because it's an attractive commodity to own. But it has other special features that make it convenient to use as money. It's very valuable in very small quantities. So you don't have to carry a whole bunch of seashells. You can carry a tiny bit of gold. It's infinitely divisible. You can chop it up and hammer it out into extremely tiny pieces, okay? So that you could buy one fish at a time rather than buying 1,000 fish with a bar of gold. So it has nice features. One problem with gold is it's so valuable, you got to protect it. Okay, so one of the disadvantages of moving from barter to using an intermediate good is that if that good is extremely valuable, it's subject to thievery. Fortunately, you had goldsmiths. Goldsmiths would turn gold into jewelry and other art objects. And goldsmiths were used to protecting their gold. So they could hold your gold for safekeeping. Lock it up in safes. Now, the goldsmiths came to realize that they can issue receipts against the gold that they hold, and they discovered that you don't get everybody coming in on the same day to demand their gold back. So they start issuing extra receipts. Okay? Those receipts can circulate as the medium of exchange. So you don't actually have to use the gold, you can keep it locked away. And you can instead use receipts for gold as your money. All right? And the goldsmith discovers what we now call the deposit expansion process. You can multiply the amount of money by issuing more receipts than you have gold. And so that is where banks come from. So this is the story that's been handed down generation after generation. And it's sort of an origin story, which may or may not be true, okay? But it's also a story that gets at a nature of money, okay? That is, money is a medium of exchange. And that is the way that most economists approach money. The nature is all about the use as a medium of exchange. And because we are multiplying the amount of gold that's backing up the money, the problem is if you issue too many of those receipts, then you get inflation, okay? And so if you get too much of the medium of exchange issued, you can get inflation. So the focus is all on this. Okay, now let me start to develop an alternative approach to money, which has one big advantage. It actually fits the historical record, which the other does not at all. There's absolutely no evidence that there was any market economy ever based on barter. There's no evidence that money came out of barter as an efficiency enhancing innovation of Friday and Crusoe. There's no evidence in favor of that. There's a very nice book by Graeber, which you can read. He's an anthropologist, and he's looked through all the history. I had done that on my own, but he did a much more thorough job. There's no evidence for that story at all. The story I'm going to tell you, there is evidence. Okay? When archaeologists dig up artifacts that come from periods before there was writing, it's very difficult to determine what the artifacts are, okay, other than obvious things, okay, drinking utensils and so on, okay? So archaeologists have dug up this stone, upper left-hand side. It has some scratches on it. I hope you can see it from your seat. Okay. What are they? We don't know. They're hash marks. Why did some early human, this is about 500,000 years old, 500,000 years ago, some human made scratch marks on a rock. Took some effort. Why did he do it, or she? We don't know. Okay. Go to the upper right-hand side. These are bones. These are much newer. These are 50,000 years old. Okay? Much more complicated. Maybe you can't tell, but there's a whole bunch of hash marks in the bones. What are they? We don't know. It sure looks like somebody is keeping track. It looks like a record of some kind. What were they recording? We don't know. Okay. Let's move down to the ball. Okay, this is a bit over 5,000 years old. There are holes in the ball through which somebody pushes tokens. The tokens are spread out on the right-hand side. What are they? Well, we know a fair amount about these because these tokens represented things like a goat, a sheep, a horse. Okay? Because much later, well, not too much later, they discovered that rather than pushing the tokens into the balls, we can push the tokens into a clay tablet and keep the record that way. That way we can use one token over and over and over again. If it's 5 sheep, you push it in the clay 5 times. And that leads to the clay Shubati tablets, which we can read. We know exactly what they say. Okay, 5,000 years ago. This was the invention of writing. As far as we know, writing was invented to keep track of monetary contracts, contracts in money terms, money as a unit of account. So we can read these. The earliest evidence of writing is all about recording money values. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us first, money is older than writing. We're never going to dig up out of the ground somebody's diary where he says, today I invented money. And this is why I did it, and this is how I did it. We'll never discover that. Money existed before writing. Okay. So that's why we're not going to really know the origins of money, but it certainly does not seem to be consistent with the barter story, because as far as we can tell, money came out of, was invented by, not Robinson Crusoe and Friday, but by authorities. Okay? In the beginning, probably religious authorities, and later civil authorities. And money was invented not to facilitate exchange, but to keep accounts. Money was first a money of account. Okay? I would like to go into this in much more detail, but I had 45 slides when I started, and we've only gone through a couple, and I'm going to have to try to finish this. So in question and answer, if you want to know more about the history, I can do that. Okay, moving on. Well, this is the American Indian wampum belts, but I wanted to point out the tally sticks here. Maybe you've heard of tally sticks. You've heard the term in English, raise a tally. When the King of England wanted to fight a war, he would raise a tally. What did he do? He got hazelwood sticks. They put notches across them, very much like the bones that are 50,000 years old. Put notches across them, and then split them down the middle. You've heard the term stock and stub. One is a stock, one is the stub. The king would keep one in the treasury, one half, and the other half he spent. Okay, spent into the economy to provision the army. At tax time, the taxpayers would bring their half of the stick. And the treasurer for the king would match the two to make sure you didn't counterfeit. What would counterfeit mean? Put more hashes in to claim that it was worth more. Okay? Matched them. Matched the stock and stub. Once he receives back the tally stick, the taxes have been paid. So most people have this idea that throughout Europe, gold coins were the main means of payment and medium of exchange. Actually, most spending by the crown and most taxes collected were in the form of tally sticks until very recently. In fact, in England, the king was still collecting taxes in tally sticks until 1840s. That's when they finally abolished the tally sticks. The people who worked in the treasury were so happy they didn't have to match stock and stub anymore. They threw them all into the fire and burned down Parliament. There's a very famous painting by Turner that shows the burning of the Houses of Parliament by the people who worked in the Exchequer, who were so glad they didn't have to collect any more tally sticks. Okay? So, an alternative view. The term modern money, which I used in the '98 book, actually comes from John Maynard Keynes. Everyone knows the general theory, but he had already written a very important two-volume book called The Treatise on Money, which actually goes into much more detail on the nature of money and the history of money, the origins of money, and so on. And he, I think, mostly gets it right in the sense that what Keynes had said so long ago, 1930, has been confirmed by the anthropological and archaeological evidence that we have gotten since the 1930s. Okay, so he said, for the past 4,000 years at least, we've had modern money. Okay? So what I'm going to describe now is how money has worked for the past 4,000 years, at least, according to Keynes. And that's about right. Okay? Now, why can we be pretty sure about the past 4,000 years? Writing. Okay? We don't really know before that. It could be true, the barter story could be true, okay? We don't know. But what we do know, for the past 4,000 years, it's been nothing like the barter story.